Overdress Set 1 is finally out in Japanese format, and players who have access to the cards are competing in tournaments. But in our age of shared results, let's take a peek at what we can expect when the set releases in English. Hey, what's going on YouTube? Winning Image here today, out to bring you guys kind of an early meta-analysis for Cardfight Vanguard Overdress Set 1. Before I get into it, I want to tell you guys I am not responsible for gathering these results. I really want to thank the Dexander.blog, who does amazing work organizing these decks by event so they can properly understand the meta. So if you want to see any of the deck lists, be sure to check out his site and keep tabs on it for future updates. With all that out of the way, if you're interested to see what's winning overseas, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the Winning Image YouTube channel, and comment your thoughts of what you think of these results. Now let's talk about these decks because the text don't lie. Okay, so taking a look at this representation graph, it's clear to see that during the first weekend of the set, we could get an idea of what people are playing, and how clear it is that Keter Sanctuary dominates representation at a whopping 36.96%, with the next closest deck being Barrow Magnus at not even half that at 15.22%. Following that is Seraph Snow, Virina, Magnolia, Hexorb, Bruce, and Orphis. Sadly, no Zorgar or no Eugene on this chart because we all know those decks need a little bit more pieces to compete. But now, let's take a look at each of the nations. Dragon Empire. So week 1 saw 4 tops for the main character nations, and to no one's surprise, they were all Virina. So taking a look at some of the deck lists, you could clearly see that there's a difference in the amount of Trickstar and Virina some decks are playing, with one deck actually only playing one Virina. There's some interesting things to look at though when you look at these lists, as some of them play the Blitz order to pure bright pure players to make sure that you could guard every attack, and play Trickstar as a starter. Now this is where I think Trickstar as a starter is actually showing results. It's an idea a few of myself and a few of my viewers had pointed out, so I think there's definitely room for that thing to kind of be explored further. And it's cool to see that people are actually taking advantage of it, with only really one of the decks playing Sunrise Egg as a starter. Keter Sanctuary. Week 1 saw 20 tops for this nation, with 17 of them being Bastion and only 3 being Hexorb. So let's take a look at Bastion. Bastion, of course, is like kind of a part of the main 5 Overdress units. So every deck for Bastion seems pretty standard. With only a few changes being between the orders that you play and kind of the ratios that you play. So all of them seem pretty similar as long as you're playing the Bastions, the Aldens, and the Angel that gives you guard. And then a little difference in triggers with some decks playing 8 crit, 3 draw, 1 over, or 7 crit, 4 draw, 1 over. So it's cool to see those kind of differences in the Bastion deck building. I'm really interested to see how people play the order, because I do think that the one that gives a little bit more defense might be a little better, just because you're able to last longer in these kind of rushy format right now. But also the Pot of Greed order that draws you 2 cards. 2 Counterblast is a little expensive in my opinion, because Alden also costs 2 Counterblast. So if you don't have Alden like one of the decks doesn't, it's definitely a good replacement until you could get those cards. And then for Hexorb, all 3 of those decks are a little interesting as well. So they also take advantage of a lot of the generic Keter support that you would normally see in the Bastion deck, such as the on-hit, counter-charge, soul charge, as well as Alden, because the 5k every time it attacks could help you put your attack out of guarding range. So with the Hexorb deck, a lot of the decks are playing crits and fronts rather than crits and draws, which is kind of cool to see, just to see a little bit of variance in kind of the deck building. And the power of fronts in the Hexorb deck is a lot more stronger than I would say most decks. So Hexorb is a deck that also requires a lot of Persona Ride. So without the Persona Ride, you aren't going to be killing your opponent as fast. So the fronts kind of make up for that and help you create big columns. Brandt Gate. Week 1 for this deck saw 7 tops with 5 Seraph Snow and 2 Orphis. I'm gonna be real with you guys, I am not too well versed on Brandt Gate yet. However, I have been playing against it and understand how the prison mechanic and Orphis stuff works. And with the Orphis list, they're playing a hybrid as well, which is also interesting to see. So with the Seraph Snow decks, I think a lot of them seem pretty similar, with all of them kind of playing the same cards, and the deck kind of building itself as of right now. However, the difference is in the back of grade 3s, with some of them playing kind of the Blau related one and then the other one, robot related one. I forgot the name. So if I'm a Brandt Gate player, I definitely want to monitor how Orphis develops going forward, because I want to see if that deck can stand alone and top as well as a Seraph Snow deck would, especially as people are trying to figure out the ins and outs of the deck. Dark States. Week 1 saw 10 tops, with 7 of them being Barrow Magnus and 3 of them being Bruce. Let's start with Bruce, because I was so wrong on how popular this deck would be. I guess Spike Brothers are only popular in the West as some people think, but taking a look at these lists now, we could get a better idea of some of the common themes that each of the deck has. So taking a look at all the Bruce lists that I could see, the 3 of them are all different in some way, shape, or form. But some common themes among them are they all play the same grade 3s, they all play the same grade 2s, but it's where the grade 1s is where things get different. Now, Acrobat Presenter automatically seems like a staple for this deck. A lot of decks are playing it at 4, just so they could get the soul charge in early, I guess, and when they get to their final rush, they want to be able to have the 5 soul. But one quick difference is that there's a few trigger differences. Some decks are playing fronts, some decks are playing draws, so it's definitely cool to see that people are taking advantage of front triggers a little bit more than they were at the start of V. And it's nice to see it in the Bruce deck, which I think is still one of the best decks of the format. Barrow Magnus, definitely cool. The Pale Moon Dr. Regular's aesthetic of Overdress set 1. You've been taking advantage of the Bruce and its own mechanics. Why do I think this deck is so good? Is because of the 5 attacks and board wipe that it offers for your opponent. Although the conditions can be difficult to meet at times, you have a lot of cards in your deck that can get you there. And especially with the inherent soul charge it has, it doesn't seem too far off, especially with the effects that you use in your deck. So with these 5 high-powered attacks coming at your opponent, and especially if you Persona Road, you pretty much just won the game at that point. So that's why I think Barrow Magnus is so good. And I think that there's different ways to build it if you want to get to it faster, such as if you want to play the Soul Charge order or any of the other orders that Soul Charge. And if you just hit an over trigger, the game's just thrown out the window for your opponent. Stoicheia. Week 1 saw 5 tops for this nation with 4 Magnolia and 1 Zorga. So taking a look at some of the Magnolia lists, all the Magnolia lists seem pretty similar. All of them play the Mantis, which is cool. But I do think a card that they're sleeping on is the Zorga Grade 1. I think the Zorga Grade 1, even though it costs soul, allows you to see more cards in your deck and allows the deck to get even deeper to see some of its combo pieces. So that's one card that I think the Magnolia deck should try and take advantage of on going forward. And I think we'll definitely see it pop up at least once or twice in some of these deck lists. Now, I think the Stoicheia over trigger is actually one of the better ones, being able to essentially deal 3 damage on turn 1. And get your opponent to a high damage count, which is one of the reasons why I think Magnolia is so good. Because the second it rides grade 3, with the amount of rush that it has, it's hard for the opponent to keep up if they're already behind and get off these oppressive attacks. So it's harder for them to really just defend, honestly. And with the Festival Collection support, I think it only gets better. And honestly, with this list, it's really cool to see that people are using some friend of the channel, Top Deck Heroes proxies. You know, gotta shout them out for all the work that they do for the community. And yeah, that's all for Magnolia and Zorga. So Zorga is definitely interesting. I think this deck needs a little bit more. The orders could definitely brick you at times, which is a really interesting piece of this deck's deck building. I don't think the list at top is essentially going to be the final list, because people are still testing this deck week 1. So we'll see how Zorga does going forward. I could be completely wrong, which I probably am, but let's see how it does and if the Alchemagic deck can survive without support. Now that we've gone over each of the nations, I want to hear from you. Let me know what you guys think of these decks and how you see the meta going forward. With set 2 coming up in a month or so, these decks from set 1 are here to stay unless Token Ranwu can shake things up. With that being said, I want to thank you all for watching, have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.